Oh, you talking about the monstrosity? Till it never comes. That thing is huge. I tell you
All right,
what.
Madam Chair, we're live. And,
Okay.
if you would like, you can remove the mask while you speak, but when you're not speaking, please put your mask back on.
All righty, it's called to order. Guess we'll start from my left to right.
Ryan Dean, I'm here.
Lisa Robinson.
Margaret
present.
Thompson. Kevin Dole.
Sarah Williams.
All righty. Done roll call, approval of the agenda. Here a motion.
We have Dr. King on the
Hey, Dr.
on the
King.
line as well.
Hello, yeah, present.
Good.
So the only person missing that I've heard from is Jeffrey Roberts. He said he wasn't going to be able to make
Ms.
it,
Lamarcker.
and I have not heard from Ms. Lamarcker.
Okay. All righty, then we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Approval of previous meeting minutes. Hear a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, second by Kevin and Dr. King. Makes no difference to me. Now we're ready for citizens' comments. Gentlemen?
So the two gentlemen we have in the audience are here to speak on the noise ordinance discussion.
Okay.
So I don't think they have anything outside of that. Okay.
Go ahead. Come on up.
Well, when we get to that point, then
Well,
we'll
it says approve, okay, he's,
yeah, this is for anything that's not on the agenda.
all right, I got you. Sorry about that.
Lowell, what is the number?
6539886.
6539886. If there's any citizen that wants to comment on something that is not on, it's 6539886. So there's nobody in attendance. Madam Chair, we'll keep the line open. If somebody calls in, we'll let us know.
Okay. All right, Chief, I guess this is your role, department status.
Yes, ma'am. I will quickly update. We received the tasers within the last couple of weeks. We are starting our training next week for all of our staff, and they'll be issued the new tasers coming out. We have 2 vacancies currently, and we have 2 that just graduated the academy 2 weeks ago. They are now in their field training phase, and will be hitting the road here shortly. We have 1 who just started the academy, so he'll be down there for at least 8 weeks, and then hopefully come back to us. We have 1 vacancy in the comm center. We received several applications. They're in the interview phase now for that position, and the 2 vacancies that we have for officers, we have also held a process or holding a process, and they're also in the interview phase of that. So hopefully we'll have those filled shortly. The department, myself, Lieutenant Gooch, and Sergeant Kelly attended a 2-day jail managers class down in Columbia the last 2 days. We came back yesterday to try and make sure that we're staying on top of what we need to for our jail. For those on the board, it is a level 1 facility, which is basically a facility that we can only hold somebody no longer than 48 hours. Typically, it's just overnight. And there are requirements for that. It's not as stringent as, say, a county jail or a state jail, but it still has a lot of requirements to ensure that the prisoners are treated properly, they're fed properly, they're in a safe environment, they're not subject to assaults or attacks, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we went to the class for, is to find out what those state regulations are and make sure that we're adhering to them. That's pretty much, and the only other thing is, as we all know, football season is starting. The city is planning a football game viewing on College Avenue on September 4th for the Clemson, Georgia game. So we are in the planning stages for that. We've reached out to to a handful of area state and local agencies to help us staff that. We'll have have several officers coming in from other departments to help us with that event. So it'll be pretty busy. That'll be Labor Day weekend, Saturday of Labor Day weekend. And then, of course, we have the first home game the weekend following. So we are in the throes of planning for that and making sure that we're coordinating with the university for all those upcoming events. Kind of, I guess, an update. I think we spoke a little bit about some signage. The ordinance was brought before the city council for the maximum speed limit of 25 miles per hour. It passed the first reading. I think it has to go one more reading before it's put into place. We have several locations in town where we've been focusing on enforcement. One is Karen Drive and Blue Ridge. We had an individual who was failing to stop for the stop signs, not even slowing down for the stop signs, was caught on video doing it a couple of times, and we were able to catch that individual and cite them, and so that has curbed that activity in that neighborhood. Since school started over there, the traffic in that neighborhood has been tolerable, I'll say, in that we haven't received any complaints from any of the neighbors, so some of the traffic control that we put in there seems to be working. We also have officers that are monitoring that area as well. And that's it for the department update. It's okay. Right into the crime.
Yes, sir.
So real quickly, this is the June 2021 crime and traffic report. We have 5 assault and batteries that were reported, 1 domestic violence and 1 sexual assault. Arrests were made in all of our domestic violence cases, and the victim declined prosecution in the sexual assault case. This is June. It should be July. Excuse me. Let me go back. I thought that sounded a little familiar from the last time. Sorry about that. Okay. So we had 7 assault and batteries, 4 domestic violence, 0 sexual assaults. Warrants were issued in 75% of the domestic violence calls. No arrest was made in 1 incident due to there was not enough evidence for a warrant and the victim being uncooperative. Malicious destruction of personal property were 6, 8 larcenies, motor vehicle theft 4, motor vehicle break-ins 12, and 0 burglaries. Warrants were issued in 1 of the vehicle break-ins. 75% of the stolen vehicles reported in July were recovered in other jurisdictions. None of the motor vehicle break-ins involved force to enter a vehicle. So I will say one of the stolen vehicles that we had was stolen when the victim pulled into a gas station, got out of the vehicle, left the keys, and I believe the vehicle running, the suspects pulled up next to that vehicle, got out, jumped in, and took off. We recovered the vehicle up in the Greer area. That vehicle had fled from the highway patrol and basically got stuck in an open field, damaged the vehicle pretty well. We recovered a cell phone out of that vehicle, and the suspects had evidence. We got a search warrant for the cell phone, and there's evidence where they were involved in several other crimes in the upstate area and other jurisdictions. So our detectives are coordinating with all those jurisdictions to identify the individuals that were involved, which we're pretty sure we know who they are, and then get all those crimes that were committed. Some of those crimes were robberies, some were burglaries, so this goes to show you how our criminals like to travel around the area and not just necessarily here for one reason or another. None of the motor vehicle break-ins involve force to enter the vehicle, so again, unlocked vehicles being entered. Traffic report, we had 4 hit and runs, 12 driving under suspension, and 5 DUIs. The tickets issued last month, 82 were for speeding, 9 for disregarding a sign or signal, 19 driver license violations, 28 vehicle license violations, operating uninsured motor vehicles 4, open container in a vehicle 3, and possession of fake or false ID 11. Total traffic collision reports taken for the month of July was 52. Underage in possession, we made 21 charges in July, and possession of drugs or paraphernalia, we made 30. One thing that I will say, and you'll see next month an increase in minor in possession and a lot of fake IDs, and obviously it's because our students are back. I'm coming up with a plan to do a pilot project in trying to help combat the fake IDs that are coming in. You can go online and buy a fake ID that looks almost identical to the real one with the holograms on it and everything. So it's very difficult for a lot of the establishments to pick up on these IDs and detect that they're fake. There is a service or app out there that is pretty good at detecting them when you scan them in. And so we're going to do a little pilot project and see how effective they are and see how we can move forward in trying to combat this problem. And it's, when I say establishments, a lot of people just think it's the bars downtown. It's not. We have gas station convenience stores that we make a lot of arrests out of, where we watch them go in, purchase a beer, come out, and they're using the fake IDs there as well. So any questions about the crime report?
No.
Seeing none. Let's see. All right. Madam Chair, I think we're, before we go on to the next topic, Lowell, is there anybody on the line?
No phone calls.
Okay. So we have no phone calls. So with your authorization, we'll move on to the noise ordinance discussion. So as you can see, there are a few people in the audience, and just for the record, Miss Lee Marker has made it. She's sitting in the back of the room as well. We have a few folks here. I had sent out a few invitations, and not everybody that I invited has shown. Mr. Littlejohn is here. He is a resident of do you live? He lives in the neighborhood adjacent to the downtown. I'm not sure which side. We have Cameron Parrish, who's the owner of Tigertown Tavern, and we also have Roy Martin, who's also a resident in one of the adjacent neighborhoods. We started discussing this a little bit before we went on the record. Administrator Blondell and I have had several conversations about our noise ordinance, and I sent copies out to everybody to take a look at our current noise ordinance. And our current noise ordinance is pretty restrictive when it comes to certain activities. And I know that certain business owners have approached us to see how they can have some tweaks made to the noise ordinance so that they can have certain activities. So it covers a lot of areas. One of the things that we run into on a routine basis is when a citizen hears noise or music at their residence and they call us to complain about it. A lot of times, because of the standard that we have to meet, there's usually a differences of opinion between the officer that comes out and the resident as to whether the noise is excessive or not. So we could talk about that, but in to keep everybody's time in mind and allow folks to speak, Madam Chair, I just recommend that we allow each person in the audience to go ahead and come forward and speak about the issues that they have with the current ordinance, and we can continue the discussion from there if you're okay with that.
Sounds good.
So if you would come to the podium and state your name before you start, and we'll go from there.
I'm Jack Littlejohn. I live at 103 Hillcrest Avenue. And I'd like to say that I'm also one of the owners of Todaro Pizza. So I'm interested in business downtown being good. So I see things from both sides of the argument. I have the ordinance here that until few weeks ago, I hadn't read past the opening. The opening of the ordinance says, you can't create a noise nuisance off of your property. Nobody had gotten down to the exceptions when I was talking to the city administrator about it, things like that. And then we got down to the exceptions, and, one of the problems that I think is happening is when this ordinance was written, nobody did business outside. There were no outside spaces at bars or restaurants downtown. And the other thing is the music amplification equipment that was available at the time this ordinance was written was prohibitively expensive. I've had issues with just neighbors over the last 2 or 3 years, where there are rental houses with kids living there, where they can afford speakers this tall on their porch. And when they moved out, they just threw the thing away. It's laying on the day I saw that speaker laying on the side of the road waiting for trash pickup was a great day. But these things have become extremely inexpensive, not just for kids living in rental houses, but for bands and bars and whatever. And the difference between music inside an establishment and outside is incredible. Because when you have live music at one of these outside areas, if it's a band, what they want is to play loudly. And if they cranked up their amplification equipment as loudly inside as they do outside, people's ears would bleed. But when it's inside, there are multiple walls that dampen it. And, when this ordinance was written, none of that happened. So, if there's music inside of a bar, I never hear it. But when it's outside, the worst is from an establishment, not Tiger Town, but one that is, I've gone to Google, it's 300 yards away from my house. So 3 football fields away. And the bass is audible inside the house. And I've got new insulated windows and everything. And then you call and complain, and, it's 7:30. And, it's not 10:30 yet. So what can we do about it? But that seems unfair to people who, I've lived in the same house for 22 years, and this has only become a problem over the last 2 or 3 years with the advent of outdoor spaces and, again, cheaper speakers, and it's difficult. I would love it if these outdoor spaces were used where patrons could go and escape the noise that's inside and have a conversation outside. And that would be fantastic. But when the amplified music is outside, it travels, and especially the low frequencies don't just travel, but they travel and they get inside. They're inside the house. It's not like I'm complaining about noise in the yard. I'm not trying to sit outside and complain about that. Even though, when bands are inside, you don't even really hear them out in the yard. It's only really outside music amplification that is a real problem. And I note in the ordinance, another exception is for construction noise. Construction noise is cut off at 8 o'clock. And I assume because they assumed when they wrote this ordinance that it was very loud. But now music outside is very loud and travels and is difficult. And another issue with it that is a little irritating is that it seems to me that now that students are back, it's not quite as much of a problem as it was back in the summer. Some establishments, and again, not Tiger Town, some establishments seem to me that they were using this racket as a way to bring people in. When people got out, there's a limited number of people in the summer going downtown, so I'm going to make a big racket, so when they get out of their car, they'll say, oh, what's that? I'm going to go over there. And it's just extremely frustrating when you're trying to live and enjoy your home. And, I think this ordinance was written thinking that somebody right next door to you was going to be throwing a party inside and, you know, you give them a break and that sort of thing. But when you're having music coming inside your house from 300 yards away, I think that's too much. You know, and again, I understand the other side of it, people wanting to make as much money as they can, but I feel like they're making that money on my back where I'm trying to live.
What would you do?
Well, what I would do is, gosh, if it were up to me, you know, I would.
Now, you got to consider the environment we're in.
Right.
We're in a college town. These are young kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's the environment we live in. This is what fuels our economy.
Well, and again, remember, as I said, this is a new problem.
Right.
This is not a problem that has been going on for 20 years. Because, you know, I know what pedestrian traffic sounds like. You know, in the right time of the year, it's nice to sleep with your window open, but you can do that Sunday through Wednesday. You can't do that Thursday through Saturday because people are going to walk by and yell.
Don't you have a lot of foot traffic on Hillcrest because that is an air street?
Sure. But that's not a problem.
Okay.
You know, first of all, when you close your windows, you don't really hear them. And if you do hear them, you just roll back over and go to sleep because they're pedestrians. They're moving. They're going to be on to the next house and the next house. And within 5 minutes, they're going to be blocks and blocks away. But when you've got music going for hours and hours, you know, there's nothing you can do about it. And it's not going to stop because, you know, that's the nature of it.
So what would make you happy that with this ordinance? Because personally, I think 10:30 is too early for a venue to shut down in downtown.
Well, I'm not suggesting they shut down.
Yeah.
I'm just suggesting we look at outdoor music. You know, if you want to have a band in your establishment, I guess everybody remembers back during the pandemic when there was a big kerfuffle about the band and the big crowd inside and, you know, how it was going to be a super spreader event. That is the closest bar to me. And that band, you know, I remember seeing that in the news the next day and thinking, gosh, I didn't even know. They irritate me all the time. I didn't even know anything was going on because the band was inside, not outside. If that band had been outside,
But again, there are going to be bands outside. What would you do?
well, I would be more restrictive on bands outside. I don't see why that's a right. Just because you've made an outdoor space, I don't know why that gives you a right to make as much noise as you want.
That's all I was wanting to hear is what you would do, what you would restrict.
Oh gosh, if it were up to me, I would remove the music exemptions altogether. I mean, I know that that's pushing it further than it's probably going to go, but that's what I would do. Because I don't have a problem with music inside any of these establishments. So the idea that you have to have an exception, I don't know why someone has a right to make noise even between 7 a.m. and 10:30.
I personally don't think people sit and look at it as having a right. I think it's the atmosphere. There's young people. This is what they want to hear. I don't think it has anything to do with making a jab at you.
Well, I know that it's not.
It's just like I live over behind Sardis, and being around the water, noise travels. I can hear stuff all the way over, and I'm not near a band or anything.
Well,
So, Madam Chair, can I make a point of clarification? Mr. Littlejohn, I think what you're referring to under specific prohibitions, where it's listing in here, it says in residential areas, music, however produced, is not allowed between 10:30 p.m. and 7 a.m. if plainly audible at or beyond the boundary of the property where the music is being produced. I don't think that's an exemption. I think that what that's saying is if you're producing music outside of those hours and you can simply just be heard past the property line, then it's an automatic violation.
Yeah, exactly.
I think in between those times, if you go to page 1 and you look under the definition for excessive noise, if the music, which here it says any noise which is plainly audible at or beyond the property boundary on on which the noise is being produced, and which is such a volume, nature, intensity, duration, location, timing, and/or repetition that a reasonable person of ordinary sensibility would find that it interferes with the comfortable enjoyment of life and/or property by another person, then it's deemed an excessive noise, and it can be cited within those time parameters that you're talking about.
And my discussions with the city administrator and his discussions with the city attorney from there back up what you said. But when I call, the other exceptions are what your dispatchers and your officers respond with. And they say, because of these sections, we can't do anything.
Well, I think well, one, it's a training thing, but I do agree with you where we come into, we have to make the determination about the reasonable person of ordinary sensibility.
And I'll tell you,
that's very subjective. So you may, depending on the officer that goes, if it's someone who is younger,
But if you set a timeline, if you set that time, then it's yes or no.
well, outside the
That's
time on
my
page
time,
2, I agree. But I
yeah.
think what he's referring to is inside of that time frame.
Right.
If the officer that responds is a younger officer and maybe has a higher tolerance of noises like this and doesn't live in that area, they may come to the determination that the reasonable person of ordinary sensibility thing hasn't been met,
and often,
in their opinion.
often they don't even, you really are getting the pushback from the dispatcher before you even get to the officer.
Well, you shouldn't. If you're getting that, I need to know about that, because the
So-
officer has to go out and make that determination.
What happens, and the flip side of the coin is, if it was student housing, with a speaker on the porch, it's never a problem. They instantly go and instantly handle it. When it's a business, and I'm sure it's intimidating, especially if you're a young officer, to go and speak to somebody like Cameron and doesn't want to hear it, it's a different scenario. So I get where they're coming from, and I get what their motivations are. But it's difficult, and I'm serious that I'm making decisions based on what comes out of this about where I'm going to live, because it's extremely difficult.
You said, it's going to depend on if you continue to live here or what. So tell me, what is this consistent problem?
Well, like I said, as of late, now that everybody
And that's
has,
the difference, if it's a consistent problem.
now that everybody has more business than they know what to do with, right now, it's not, it seems to have toned down, but you never know. Like you'll go 5 or 6 weeks and think, oh, the administrators talked to somebody, and maybe they've gone around and talked to somebody, and you cross your fingers and think maybe that's happened, and then boom, you'll have a week where I had 2 going, and it was ridiculous inside. And if you step outside, it seemed like you were at a concert at one of these amphitheaters, like you would go to.
Is it the reasonable person standard that's in the ordinance that is a barrier to you being able to get the relief you want if there was a decibel
I don't know. The problem
clarification
with
in
the
the
decibel,
ordinance? And I don't know how officers
we
would
could-
read that, but I know other ordinances
I've spoken to the
indicate
city
that.
administrator about that, and his perspective is that if you put the decibel reading on it, you're going to shut out a lot of reasonable people who think, that something just below that is annoying.
Yeah.
But without it, if it's just a full stop, we're not doing anything until 10:30, then maybe something would be better than nothing. I don't know. All I can tell you is that I've lived there for 20 years. I'm comfortable with pedestrian noise. I know what it's about. I know that the noise from people and the insides of these establishments is not that loud. When the 2018 National Championship viewing party happened, speaking of the one we're getting ready to have, I stayed at home and I watched the game at home, and then we thought, let's go see what's going on downtown. And we walked out, and it's a quiet evening. You can hear the crickets. and you walk down North Clemson and come around the corner, and then you hear the roar, you hear the people, because the frequency of the human voice, even that many of them, isn't loud enough to get through and travel like these giant speakers that are with bass that's low frequency that's going through and will get through your windows and your walls. So, that sort of noise needs more barriers to not drive people crazy.
Just a point of order, Robert's rules. So the chairman doesn't ask questions repeatedly of the guests, right? You can call if you want. I think it might be efficient. It's already 6:30. You listen to each of the guest speakers' short speech. Great idea to say, what would you suggest again? That we would hear all three statements.
Would you like to sit here and run it then?
The board or not?
Okay. Well, I just want to know. So that's my personality, and I want to know how we solve a problem. But taking just a few instances here and there, I don't think is anything to make a rule change. I think it's something that has to be a consistent problem.
Well,
And that's what I'm trying to get to.
A good point that you made to ask each of them what their suggestions, but I would suggest, in the interest of time, and the board following those rules, that we consider listening to all of them, and then the board has a discussion and ask any of them that have agreed to remain or the chief to make a comment. And if we did a discussion with 2 or 3 people, each of them for half an hour.
Can I-
I'm just suggesting we follow.
Can I
Yes,
just
sir.
make one more point,
Sure.
and I'll sit down? If the reasonable person standard applies, then there's no reason for the exemption. There's no reason for the 10:30 to 7 a.m. What is that in the ordinance for if a reasonable person can find it to be a nuisance any time of day? That's my question. So it either is or it isn't. And my experience has been, when dealing with business nuisance noise, 10:30 is a hard line. It's a hard cutoff. If it's not 10:30, you're not getting any traction. And so those are my thoughts, and I appreciate your time.
For discussion purposes later in the board, Mr. Littlejohn, the noise disturbance that you have to deal with, is it from noise that is originating from the ground level, or is it noise coming from establishments that are multi-story?
Well, I don't even know. My primary issues are from the rooftop bar at the study hall, which is elevated. And the other primary issue is from It's Your Wiener, and I haven't even been over there to see what their outdoor area looks like.
Okay.
That's how loud it is, that it's like, if you know what it sounds like when a car drives by that has the big bass tubes, and that's what I thought it was the first time. And I thought, all right, eventually they're going to keep on going. And then after 20 minutes, I go outside, and it's coming from 900 yards away, and it sounds like a car driving by outside. And I don't even know what their setup is. So it's coming from so far away that I don't even know. I don't even go over there. And it's far enough away that I never go by. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Well, you can remove your mask if you'd like while you're speaking.
Basically, we've had, since the Catholic Church bought most of the houses, the noise has gone down. But we have the problem areas. I wish there was some way to go and speak to them before it becomes a problem. And it's it's been years ago, but 1:30 in the morning, Sweet Caroline was coming in the window. But overall, it's pretty good now. I can't hear what he can hear, and we're not that far apart. It's the way the sound travels. And as far as fireworks, I would wish there was a way just to ban them, except on holiday, because your dog's laying here. Next thing you know, bam, and you don't even know they're coming. And at least on the holidays, you know to get them ready for it. And that's basically all I have to say about it. But if you could, any way they could speak to the trouble, they know the problem areas. If you go by and speak to them and say, we're not going to tolerate the noise, it could help. Thank you.
Mr. Martin, for the board's sake, Mr. Martin lives in the Edgewood neighborhood. Do you ever hear noise coming from the downtown area, from the establishments down there?
The way the buildings are, I don't hear it. I don't hear any of the bars. And
So most of
the
the issues,
that comes down the road, whereas I've got buildings in the way.
so most of the issues you observe are from other properties near your home. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I for sure am part of the problem. If we think of it as a problem like that.
Cameron, state your name, please.
Oh, Cameron Farish, Tigertown Tavern. Anecdotally, there was once a bar in this town that was causing a noise problem. Bass. They couldn't understand what was happening. They kept getting complaints, inside music, and it ended up being a hollow steel door. And eventually they were able to figure it out, and that steel door was replaced with an insulated steel door, and it solved the neighborhood complaints. I mean, there's engineering ways to solve some of these problems. We do have music on our patio. Generally speaking, we try to do it earlier when we're trying to draw a crowd in when we're not busy, but it definitely goes past 10:30. Most of our bands wrap up by 11:30 because at that point the floor space they're taking up costs me more money than the band makes me. So on the patio, I will generally try to have the bands wrap up by 11:30 because I want that floor space to make money on. It is a downtown entertainment district, business district. As Clemson grows and we see other growth in places like downtown Greenville, Bavard, Spartanburg's growing, downtown Anderson. You have these entertainment districts with the cities and municipalities are encouraging. And so live, vibrant music is a plus for increasing commerce and increasing the enjoyment of the citizens, but it does come at a cost and it decreases the enjoyment of other citizens. And I can tell you that the music that we play early is way different than the music we play late. The music we play early is the music that I like. The music that we play late is the music the kids like. And that's the kind of music that travels and booms. When we have music outside, it's generally acoustic or it's their own sound systems. We don't have a sound system of our own, and we don't pay big sound systems to come set up. How loud we are and how loud other places are, I can tell you there's a difference. And I can tell you that elevation, line of sight, that kind of thing, like when we set a band up, we point it towards the back of the building. And there's an elevation of about 30 feet to the asphalt parking lot behind us. So that sound runs into the ground and it echoes, and then it runs into that apartment building. So it kind of contains it, but other places are different, and it could be as simple as speaker placement. I mean, there are engineering ways to look at this, but I definitely feel as if, just like watching the Olympics, if you watch ice dancing and they judge it, I don't understand it. But if you watch speed skating and you time it, I know you won. So that's the one thing about decibel levels and writing a decibel level into an ordinance. Now, Chief and I talked about this just on the street. If do you have a background decibel level that you compare it to? Do you go around and get decibel levels around the city and write it down? I mean, how loud is the city on its own without my music? I mean, there's a lot of a lot of pieces and parts to an ordinance. It's going to make somebody angry that you're squashing them, and it's going to make somebody angry that you're not doing enough. We try to be more vibrant and more downtown to try to get more people to enjoy us, not just on home football games, but all the time. I think live music will make a bigger comeback. You know, the city just passed some provisions to allow some live music areas on the street that wouldn't even be in the responsibility of an establishment. It might be just a band has gotten the permit and they can just play on, I think there are 3 sections on the downtown area that they can have a little venue set up that the city has approved. And now, is that going to be a noise problem? Probably not, because they're probably not going to have any sort of amplification. But the city's trying to make it more, you know, trying to increase the scene downtown, and business owners are trying to capitalize on that. And 10:30, you know, if you told me that I need to be much quieter at 10:30, I'd be like, oh, that's early. But I do get it, you know, that amplified music at certain times, you know, there definitely needs to be some sort of compromise made. In everything, I mean, I know I'm part of the problem. I know that Tiger Town is making noise that could be heard off of Tiger Town's property. I've never been cited for a noise violation the entire time I've been at the tavern. I've been there since '93. And I have been spoken to before by an officer, and it was after some of the new condos had gone up downtown. You know, for new home construction and new apartment construction, part of the engineering process to solve these problems would be to have a increased insulation and windows in downtown businesses. You know, if you build a new structure or a new condo, you have to have a better window and insulation. And then, you know, new people, new houses, new condos, they know what they're getting into. You know, they know, hey, I'm moving downtown, it's going to be noisy. Now, people who've been here for years and years and years, they bought a house on a quiet street, and now Clemson's grown so much it's not a quiet street anymore. And I get it. And, you know, if I were a habitual problem with the city and the noise ordinance, I would much rather engineer my way out of the problem. I would much rather say, okay, we've got to change these speaker placements outside. We've got to change the bass outside. We'll get less bass outside. I'll change this door. We'll keep the front door shut instead of having the front door open. Something to that nature. If I was continually causing a problem for my neighbors, the first thing I would want to do would be to find a solution instead of having to be visited by law enforcement. I mean, once I know that I'm the problem, I want to be the most compliant neighbor and the most compliant business Clemson has. If I'm a problem, then I need to fix that problem. Now, not everybody feels that way, but that's just one way of finding a solution to a problem. And I get it. You know, if you live downtown, it's 10:30, you want to go to sleep. You want to watch your own TV, you want to listen to your own music, and you have a thump that continues through your walls. I understand that is enormously annoying. But I do want Clemson to be a vibrant, entertaining place to be, a destination people want to come to. And you think the problem that, you know, you think, okay, well, maybe we'll have an ordinance change where you can, on weekends, the exceptions for music would be later. But on weekends, we have enough business. You know, on the weekends, we're killing it. But if I start having acoustic night or a small band on Tuesday and Wednesday night, that doesn't change how annoying it is to the homeowner. It just changes what night it's So I don't know the answers. I do not know the answers. I wish I did. I don't. But I do want to be able to provide entertainment downtown, and I do want to do it in a way that makes me a good neighbor. And that's about all I want.
Madam Chair, and I have one question for Cameron before he sits down. And I'll ask the question, but I'll preface it with, no decisions are being made today. If you don't have an answer to this question, I understand, maybe something to contemplate. But if the ordinance stayed as written and this 10:30 cutoff is there, knowing from what I've been told from the city administrator and what some of the businesses have asked for, if a provision was put in here to allow for permits, so many permits within a calendar year to have events that would extend beyond the 10:30, if you don't have the answer now, I understand, but how many permits in that time, in a calendar year, would you think would be fair or reasonable for a business?
That is an excellent question, and that would at least, the permit idea would at least, there would be public knowledge that something was going to go in. So if I pulled a permit to have a live band outside so I could get past the exemption, past 10:30, at least the neighbors could look and say, okay, Cameron's pulled a permit. He's going to have a band. I need to ready myself for it. On the low end, I would just shoot for the same numbers that we'll just say low end, maybe you would say the same as football games. So we'll throw in the 7 football games. So low end, you'd say, okay, you can be as noisy 7 times. That's 7 home football games, maybe 8. On the higher end, I would say no more ever than once a week would be required. I mean, that's if you we're allowed to pull a permit for the live music outside once a week, that seems gracious plenty. But again, some other places are much more reliant on live music. And the real problem is not really the live music. We all know the real problem is DJs. I mean, that's exactly where this is stemming from. Electronic music. Certain properties in downtown Clemson, like let's just say Tiger Park, or if you had a large enough outdoor space, because outdoor is changing because of COVID. So if you had an outdoor space and you want to maximize your profit, a concert that you paid to visit at Tiger Park, I mean, you can make a killing. I mean, so if you were to set that venue up to have live outdoor music once a week, twice a week, you could pay your taxes. You could pay your bills. Would that add to the discomfort of your residential neighbors? Yes, it would. And it's, if it was all acoustic jams and Jimmy Buffett's, we probably wouldn't have much of a complaint. But when we have music that is electronic in nature, a lot less words, a lot more bass, that you don't particularly enjoy yourself, you're more likely to be upset by it. Would I even need to if this ordinance is changed and you have to pull a permit for an outdoor concert, would I need one to just have an acoustic gig on the patio? Probably not. Would I? And we no longer have bands inside at Tiger Town. It's very rare because the loss of space for human beings, which is how we pay for the bands, is too great. So we always put our bands in the patio. I don't have any plans to have any live music from now to the end of football season because I need to help with band. The band needs to help my business when I'm not busy. So my band, I would have more bands in March, April, May than I would this time of year, just because I don't want to. I'm trying to drum up business when we're slow, and when we're busy, we're busy. We don't need a band. Now, Tiger Town's type of band and type of music is a lot different than other places. You know, I probably shoot myself in the foot sometimes because I don't understand the no words music, so I don't book it. You know, I just don't book stuff I don't really, if I hate it, I'm probably not going to book it. And that probably costs me money.
So, what would you like to see right now? Would you like it to move up to
I think
past 10:30?
I think if we could
That's the question.
move past 10:30 for music venues would be helpful. If we had to limit it to the weekends, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. You know, that would be a compromise, easy. I don't think we should say 2 o'clock. You know, let's just say it's 10:30 now. 2 o'clock's when everybody has to close. Let's meet in the middle somewhere. You know, it's midnight. You know, no later than midnight. That would be.
That's what I was.
That's what I think would be fair.
What's a reasonable time,
Yeah,
especially downtown?
And also, this is just how we operate, and not my co-operators downtown. But if I can wrap something up by midnight, that gives me an hour of letting it wind down, and then from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, when it really winds down, I can start breaking that stage down. I can already have that band out the door. So midnight wouldn't be the end of the world. You know, it wouldn't be, even if you were a concert venue, like one of the operators across the street from me. It basically is a dance club and a concert venue. And if his band were to stop at midnight, the people aren't just going to leave immediately. He would still get those people, would still be in this bar, still spending money. They pay to cover to be in there, so they're going to stay in there. He would be able to break the band down, clear them out. They could probably have the van and the trailer could move all the equipment before the people left and got onto the street.
How many bands do you have a year?
What?
How many bands do you have a year, Cameron?
How many days?
How many bands?
Oh,
How many events do you have?
It would probably average out to no more than 12 bands a year. I do not book bands during football season unless it's something really spectacular. And December's out because it's Christmas and we're closed. And so no more than 1 or 2 bands really a month the rest of the time. And then and that's not including like little tiny acoustic guys, you know, like when we had the downtown festival this summer, a band came from Nashville and they needed some extra gigs. So they just set up on the patio real quick and quiet, you know, and I almost even wouldn't consider that, you know, we didn't even set up to a stage. It was just a low stage. And they started playing early, drew in some older people like me, and then they were done by 10:30. But a full, absolute rig band with full sound, I would say, we Tiger Town no more than 12 times.
Okay.
But I'm
Sure. I have no problem with it.
So, in a college town, there's going to be music, there's going to be bands, there's going to be outdoor venues with music. It seems like the issue is the amplification hitting the residents. So is there a certain amp, a certain level of speaker or system by which that would carry a certain number of feet? I mean, maybe it's a matter of setting some controls on
and our
what the
music,
amplification would be.
our music is on and louder than I like it personally all the time. So no band at all. It's still loud. In fact, I've never had a noise complaint brought to me by an officer with a band. It's always been just the house music playing. I can mute our patio and turn it off. So if I were extra annoying or extra horrible to someone downtown and the police officer comes back a second time and says, hey, they can still hear it, you're causing a problem. Immediately, I just mute the patio. Patio's off, inside on. I imagine that everybody has the ability to do that and adjust their sound levels accordingly. You know, you can. The permit thing is not going to solve the main problem with some of our residents because it's not a live band that he's hearing at his place. It's just house music pumped up. You know, the decibel level thing is it's easy in court. It's easy for the officer to say, hey, this is how loud you are here, and this is how loud you were on this guy's property. So, too loud, turn it down. And there's no real getting around. But I think the decibel level that would be reasonable is going to be a lot quieter than we're doing now. I think if we pass or change the ordinance where it has a decibel level in it, I definitely think that you could walk downtown with a decibel meter or on the app on your phone at any time, and you'd be like, you're too loud. I mean, that's simply as now. So would there be still complaint driven? The police officer's not going to drive around and listen and see how loud you are. The police officer's only going to do that if you have a complaint against you. So, but I think the decibel level idea, where you take judgment out of it, there's some pluses. The minuses is that the decibel level would be lower by far than what we are operating at now. Just my house music that we play, and it depends on who's working, on what's getting played. I got some hippies working that night, we got hippie music. We got some young bucks working that night, we might have some country music. It all depends, but that would definitely have to be, if we did that. And would I buy a decibel meter or an app for my phone? Probably, so I could check and say, okay, we're out of compliance here, we need to get in compliance.
I just think things just get so complicated, when you can just make them so simple. And, like to me, if you're an establishment and you get constant complaints, like study hall, prime example, then you do something about that establishment.
And the one thing I can say for the city of Clemson, across the board, is it's fair. I have never been singled out, not once. There's never been, some bad blood. We're going to go after Karen. The city has always been enormously fair. So if they come to me and say, you're too loud, I know they're going to go everybody else and fairly distributing the blame. Even little things, just say, I've never been singled out in the city, by the city, just me. They'll throw the blanket on downtown, but they're not going to throw the blanket just on Tiger Town. And I think that's a slippery slope to say, okay, study hall is the problem, y'all need to fix it. Now, the correct answer would be that study hall would say, you know what, we got to change our engineer. We need to change the way we aim our speakers. We need to change our bass outside. Or even if they're picking up, the elevation and the they find a way to, they should think, the more forward they would think, the better it would be for everyone. The more forward I think, the better it would be for everyone. But I've spoken long enough.
I appreciate it. I'm sorry. In the interest of time, unless anybody else has any other questions, so that you all can have a discussion. Thank you very much for your comments. Madam Chair, one thing I'll ask, one thing I will say is we get a wide range of noise complaints at the police department, okay? And a lot of the times the complainant is anonymous. We have the ability to go to our website and submit an anonymous complaint. So we get everything from the apartment next door above me is making too much noise, all the way to I can hear noise coming from the block. Some of you, I sent you all an example ordinance from where I came from, and you see decibel levels in there. There's a double-edged sword when you talk about decibel levels, and I was a trained meter operator when I was at my department, and that is you have to take an ambient noise reading first before you take a reading to determine if someone is over a certain decibel level. So if I take an ambient noise reading within a certain distance from where the noise is originating, and then I go over to where the noise is originating, that measurement is going to be made based on that base noise level. So it's not like I'm going to go all the way out to 12 Mile Park at 1 o'clock in the morning and take an ambient noise reading where I might hear a cricket or two, and then come back downtown and then take a reading and say, aha, I got you. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. The other thing is that we have to get certified meters, we have to train people to use them. It gets very problematic when we start talking about that. So some of the things to consider here, based on Mr. Littlejohn's comments and some of the others who have come up, is businesses that have outside venues, maybe thinking about or having a discussion about to what time they can have music and then prohibit any amplified music at any level from being played on those outside areas past a certain time on certain days. It may not necessarily be every day of the week, it may be a couple of days of the week, but that's something to consider. The other thing I'll point out too, when you do that, the other part of the ordinance on page 2, number 2, section B, where it talks about yelling, shouting, loud conversation, whistling, singing. So if an establishment has an outside venue and they cut off the amplified music, but their patrons are still hanging out on the outside, and there's a large crowd, and they're yelling and they're screaming, and we may still get a noise complaint on that. And that may be something that we have to deal with, depending on what's going on. I really see this, the later we get into the fall months and in the spring when the weather is very nice and people are sleeping with their windows open, that's probably where we're going to get more of those complaints. When they're sleeping with their windows closed and their air conditioners are running, we don't necessarily get it. Or if it's really cold out, they're sleeping with their windows closed, we really don't get those complaints. So it's not a simple discussion, and I think that's why we had it on here to start the discussion. We don't have to come up with an answer today. One of the things you could consider is maybe hosting a workshop and invite some more people to have the discussion and see what some of the other options would be. Madam Chair?
Sounds like a plan. Okay, we'll move on to,
Does anybody have any discussion on that or any position before he goes
The only thing I was,
go ahead.
the only thing I was going to point out is I live with an audiophile. We've got 3 subwoofers in my basement, so I definitely know when you were talking about engineering controls, there's definitely things businesses can do to sort of stop the noise. But a bigger issue, it seemed that Mr. Littlejohn was just that interfering with comfortable enjoyment of life and property doesn't seem maybe at the police department to be, all the officers know what that means, to at least go out and investigate, and that might be just talking about the ordinance a little more would be my only, before changing anything, see if maybe that might help the situation a little.
Noted.
I can tell you that all outside amplified music, there's a prohibition after midnight. So after midnight, I have to mute my outside. There is, like Chief mentioned, a roar that develops with practice. And that would definitely still be open. This kind of low roar that you get in a crowd. So, for my perspective, that's not a problem. You don't get that. You don't get that inside. Obviously, I would never call complaint. I know you were talking about other people. That's
visits, but some of the things that
Yeah.
you're talking about with the low noise, the decibel level is not gonna be that high, because that frequency is what you're hearing. It's not the ambient.
That gets us back to determining those.
Right.
Mr. Littlejohn, you know, with you living on Hillcrest, have any of your neighbors on Hillcrest have the same concerns as you do? Because that would help a lot to make a decision. Okay.
My neighbors, the left are students.
Okay.
So I would have to go, another household.
Right.
Close house, where I really got anybody, confirmed whatever. So
I just didn't know if you're getting that rumbling in your house, or the other people that live on Hillcrest feeling the same thing.
I can't answer that with certainty.
Are you aware of any commercial establishments that have put up sound barriers, like on their patio spaces, to kind of do some absorption?
I do know that there is that they do have sound vacuums, sound barriers that you can put up. And I can tell you that it was, if my business model was more dependent on live music, and I had to engineer my way out of this, that's what I would do. So if there was if I was constantly causing a complaint, constantly interacting unfavorably with law enforcement, I would say, okay, we're going to put sound vacuums and we're going to build a fence on tap. That is an excellent idea, and an excellent. I'll tell you the exact situation that happened. SO Club had this metal hollow door, and when they built some of those condos back there, there was a specific house, just the door was acting as if it was a speaker, loudspeaker pointed at this one residence, and they kept getting complaints, and they would lower the music, more complaints. It just never went away, and someone finally said, you know what? When you walk past this door, it is acting like a speaker. And they changed the door, solved the problem. But we can't, that's something we can't legislate. We can't legislate engineering solutions. That has to be left up to the business. The law will leverage, if I was in constant violation of the new ordinance, I would find a way to engineer my way out. And like I said, I want to be compliant. And I think most businesses downtown want to be compliant. Because no one wants to be the bad seed. No one wants to be the bad egg. Everybody wants to be, have a positive. And truthfully, in this day and age, information travels so quickly, you can almost put a business under by saying, this is what they're doing to me, and put it in there and crush it. And obviously, you're not right. He's not vindictive. He just had a problem we need to find a solution to. And all the neighbors probably have the same problem. And I'm thinking about it, it's like, I would almost bet that if it were me, and I know if it was itchy wieners used to cause this big problem, I would, if I owned it, I would say, okay, let's work together on this, let's do a test run. I'm going to change the angle of these speakers. That's the first thing first, let's move the angles in the direction of these speakers, and it probably would solve this problem, but it would maybe move it to someone else's house. But that's the first thing I would do. It's like, hey, let's do some thought and figure out if I can solve this without any more trouble for you. And, fencing, single-family, speaker placement, the amount of base you put out, could engineer your way out of a lot of troubles. Now, there's still going to be trouble. There's still going to be someone who's unhappy. And then that's why we have these officers, so they can mitigate the problems, and try to fix it. But yeah, and in the future, there is a...
Cameron, I hate to cut you off.
No, you're right.
We're getting late. If the board desires to have a continued conversation or a workshop, then Madam Chair, that's up to you all.
Ms. Lamaka has a question.
It seems to me like if we decide on, we're looking at which issue are we looking at? Number one, are we looking at changing the order
think that's pretty simple. Let's not make it complicated, we can fix this, or help, or suggest something, but I think anything can get worked out, anything.
At that point, from Mr. Littlejohn, I was in that crowd for the party viewing downtown. And when I got up to walk down North Clemson, I agree with you. You were in the crowd, it was noisy, but the minute you got away from it, the noise didn't funnel like you thought it would. So, right.
You ready to move on?
If you wish.
All right, board members' discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I want to start the discussion about those. We have a high school member that we haven't filled, and I was just going to suggest for a future meeting, if everybody would bring in the name of a high schooler you know, that we could try to fill that last. Through contact with high school, local high schools, and ask them, I would suggest a freshman or sophomore, so they might serve them. So perhaps for a future meeting, we might discuss it.
They are a Clemson resident.
That has to be a Clemson resident. If one of us could I would want to do that, go to the high school and talk to whoever, or I know some teachers, and probably all teachers, so perhaps a future discussion. I struck me, especially last month, when we talked about gangs, we talked about high school, it would have been darn good to have a high school here, and in this case too, right? So maybe we want to add that to the agenda.
I have nothing.
No comments?
Hearing nothing, we'll adjourn.
You have a motion to
Motion?
adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.